All right, I think we're around the number of people that said yes to the invite. We'll certainly have more people join later, but I think we can start. So I pasted the link to the call for design system post. I will paste it again for new people just in case. So that's our topic of the day. And I don't know if Lauri or Cristina wants to get us started.
So we don't have any specific agenda prepared today because it's it's a Q&A type of session. I didn't have many questions that came up front, but I can maybe talk about some of the ones that came up. So one of the questions that came up was, how does this coincide with our efforts to use AI in Drupal CMS? And I had a very long conversation about that with Cristina earlier today. And obviously, AI is an ever evolving topic where there's new capabilities that are coming up constantly. And basically, what we thought was that there might be steps in the process of creating a design system where AI can be used to help accelerate that process, but that there isn't like a sufficient tooling that would allow us to just give a prompt and generate a design system out of thin air. Maybe if there is something like that, maybe then we need to reconsider, but based on what we know, that's not true today, especially when it comes to creating design. So basically, some of the questions that I had was like, is this relevant with AI, or should you be able to use AI with this? So I think the answer is that this is relevant from my perspective, even with AI, and that maybe AI is something that we're going to be using on top of this, where it could be building specific content using the components that the design system includes, and then that's how it kind of coincides with AI. Cristina, did you get any questions beforehand, by any chance?
I did not. Basically, all the questions that I've had, I have been through you and Pam, and this is like one of the most important ones, the AI and the timeline. So what basically you said, it's what I had in mind. Basically, we're not at a point where AI can actually do the designs. So it can help on the process, but it can't do the job. Maybe it will be able to do that in the future, but at the point that we are right now, and for when we actually need that, it is not there yet. So that's why we can't replace one thing with the other. We need like professionals on the topic to actually work on this and create the best possible starting point for whoever that chooses Starshot, the Drupal CMS project with the right starting point, the right design choices, and the right combination of components.
So can we maybe have an annotated review of the brief with one or both of you? I think that would be nice to if you could share a screen with the brief, and then we walk through what is this about.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is this are you looking for some specialist who's able to do this, or you're looking for people to contribute on a free basis?
Yeah,
So
that's
is
what
the
I
question
think. Yeah,
go ahead, Kabar.
that's what I think. The high-level review of the brief would help start answering, I think.
All right, so we can do a review on a high level of the brief that we annotate. So on a high level, we are looking for a group that could be either a organization, or it could be an open source group. It could be folks who are deciding to collaborate on building a design system. So we don't necessarily demand that it needs to be a company that is offering to do this. What we are seeking to build is a design system which is shipped by default in Drupal CMS, and it has focus on different levels of components, where some of them are very primitive. So it could be things like heading, button, a block quote. But then, because of the focus of Drupal CMS is to enable marketing teams to be able to create content, we also need to build out more advanced sections using those components. So things like headers, sliders, and navigations. And we can work, the Drupal CMS team can work together with the team that is offering to work on this to define the specific requirements of these are the elements that we need. These are the sections that we need based on sort of the target markets that we are targeting for Drupal CMS in the beginning. So the scope of the work for this is to first define a design. So that's a design language of what would this actually look like? What would this experience look like? And then we would actually take that and build it into a design system. Maybe Cristina, you can talk a little bit more about that since you're the expert on design systems and can speak more to that language.
Yeah, so basically we're looking for something that can be a little bit of kind of agnostic, that's any either marketer or person that works on a marketing team, since that's one of the main targets that we're focusing Drupal CMS. They can actually get this starting point and create their own site or customize it easily in a way that will adapt to their needs. So we basically need the combination of components, a design system that can be this starting point for these projects that don't have a budget to create a completely custom design system from scratch, and they can adapt this design system into their brand. So something else that we have in mind is not just like the design system itself, it's like the purposes that it needs to solve the kind of websites that you should be able to build on that. So we're going to create a list, and in theory, you will probably have seen that on other competitors. They have, when you start installing or trying out the system, you can actually choose beyond either several templates or either several kind of sites that you're going to build. And you can choose and customize minimally that design system. So we're basically trying to create these Lego pieces that will allow users to build and put together, work with a content strategy that we will put in place. And for example, if we have events, we will need the designs for the events. We will need the designs for the basic page or the components that will be available for a landing page, for example. And all these pieces together should ideally work for the different content types, play together well, and then basically we will need, for example, as Lauri was saying, headings, buttons, but also like hero images, for example, for the homepage, and they should play together with the different parts of the design system. That's why it's important that whoever builds that has a little bit of experience on building something like this, because it will be easy to identify which are the key components. Of course, we will assess and address and help and go through the whole process. But it would be great that whoever jumps into building this has some experience on either creating a design system or creating a set of either projects that have had some sort of design system already built in, that has some experience on building components in general.
If I understood, you want design system, base design system incorporated into Drupal, but to let other people to use internal Drupal design system for their custom components, or to customize existing Drupal components in their own theme or customizations. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're building a design system that is integrated with Drupal and through single directory components. And that's especially keeping in mind that Experience Builder will allow reconstruction of pages using components, as well as in future it will allow you to build components using the UI in Experience Builder. So that's why we need this diverse set of different kinds of components. That's why we need these primitive components that you can then use to reconstruct them into different kinds of sections that we don't support out of the box. And then we use them to build sections that we ship out of the box so that we have an example of how it could be used in common scenarios of how design systems are being used.
Another question is I read this brief. I read something about the SAS that you don't want to use SAS. You want to rely only on CSS. Is that only for, let's say, customizations? You don't want to use SAS for to use SAS variables, or you don't want to use SAS at all?
So we are planning to avoid using any CSS build tools just so that we make it as easy as possible to use the design system with Experience Builder, which then provides a UI-based modification of the design system using those components. We believe that many of the use cases that SAS covers are supported by CSS built in. Today, there's obviously not everything is there yet, but there's enough in that you can build a fully fledged design system.
Does it
without
mean
using
that you?
SAS.
Sorry, Lauri. Does it mean that you want to use something like CSS in JavaScript or something like this, or pure CSS files?
So we've been using CSS variables for quite a while in Drupal core already. So we would probably be using CSS variables to a large extent for defining design tokens in CSS. So we would try to use CSS, like modern CSS capabilities for those use cases that SAS is trying to accommodate. CSS is also planning on supporting nesting. I don't know where that is right now in terms of like getting the actual proposal approved, but CSS has been adding capabilities that SAS used to offer, so that you can just do them built in browsers.
Yeah, nesting is supported by all browsers at the moment, at this very moment. What I wanted to ask, how do you plan to um, you're going to probably allow user to change colors directly from color picker from Experience Builder, I guess. And I guess you want to save these values into database. And how are you going to provide these values to variables directly on a style attribute, or you are going to update uh, some style style tag inside of dynamically build created page? Do you have any idea?
I don't. So there's probably going to be different answers to that depending on what specifically is being changed. So if we are talking about changing the values of the variables, that is probably just generating CSS on the fly, which essentially just defines CSS. It prints out CSS with those CSS variables being set with these values that user has set in the UI. Obviously, that's then different if you are considering building an actual component and then going in there and setting specific properties within that component. So that experience would be probably different from what it is to actually set those variables. We haven't designed what that experience of building those no-code components, where would we actually expose the CSS for those? We don't have a design for that.
Okay,
Yeah.
for me this sounds very interesting. So that's so far. And I'm sorry for interrupting with my questions. Please continue.
No worries. The purpose of the call was to take on questions. So that's all as expected. So maybe a little bit more about the scope of work. so the scope of work is, so it's both the design as well as implementation. However, we are open to proposals from teams where, if, for example, if a team doesn't have a designer available, but they're interested in the implementation part. So we are open to proposals where you would only do one part of the work, maybe only just the design, or maybe just the implementation, and we can then kind of look at the different kinds of proposals that we get and see what we believe would best fit the needs of this project. I do think that there's, in general, if there's a team that is experienced in both, in general, that is a benefit from my perspective, because of it reduces dependencies on external teams in a way, so you can work more efficiently as a single team. But just mentioning that we are open to both both ways of proposing to this.
I have a question about this.
Yeah,
if
go
you
ahead.
may. Are partnerships welcome? So, for example, if an implementation shop and a design shop that have some experience together want to propose together, would that be okay?
That's totally okay, and I would say that I'm not even like, if that's basically, if folks before proposals form coalitions and where they propose together, I would say that that's, from my perspective, also, it's basically the same as getting a single proposal from one organization, because of the assumption is then that they can work together.
Correct. All right.
Either the same or even better, because then we are not relying on one only company, and like two teams can work together. And one of our concerns, and one of the questions that we got in the previous days, so Pam can be here because it's super late in Australia, but she got the question of that the timelines are tight, and capacity to spend so much people in this short amount of time. It's a risk, and that's why like actually having two different companies that are working together would be amazing. Or if a company that has enough capacity, that's also really good. Either a company or a group of people that can prove their experience working together. All of those things are good, but it's important to take into account that it's like a tight deadline, at least to have like the alpha release and to start working on things. And ideally, it would be great if even before the designs are completely finished, the development starts. So that's important, that there is this coordination between both the design side of the work and also the implementation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Lenny is here from the DA in case there are any questions around how the DA can support benefits for that use case, but I think that it could be a detail that we can figure out as we go. It will be definitely possible.
I can certainly add some details about that. So basically we have the standard agreement for all the companies or individuals that are supporting Starshot by being a track lead or by delivering some of the work dedicated to the tracks. So this one will not be an exception, of course. And we for depending on the time that you are spending, we propose to we assign the credits to your company's account. So based the ratio is for each 40 hours spent, given that deliverables obviously being delivered. Sorry for the wording. But yeah, for every 40 hours spent, you are getting 50 credits.
All right. So a little bit more about the timeline and sort of scope of work on this. So we are expecting to kick off working on this in the beginning of the year, once we've made a selection, and we're expecting to have a release out around the same time as when Experience Builder is scheduled to have a release in summer of 2025, because this is something we are planning to promote together with Experience Builder. Obviously, that means we're sort of walking backwards from that. It means that we need to have some alpha releases and beta releases before that. So we can't just start working on this late in the spring. In terms of submission timelines, so we are asking for submissions by 6th of December, 2024. So we still have a few weeks on that. So that's the timeline. Was there anything else in here in the brief that would be very important to mention?
What you expect in
yeah.
the in that submission?
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
Cristina, maybe you can talk about from the design system perspective a little bit.
So basically, we're not asking for people to provide designs. This is not like a contest where the one that presents the best design gets chosen. It's more about proofs that you've developed a design system before on a design perspective, like examples of other projects or example of other where we can see that you have some experience with that, and that's what would be needed on the design system side of things. Obviously, we will use Figma, so either Figma examples or finished projects that can be shown wherever you think that can be shared. That would be stuff that could be helpful for us to evaluate. Keep in mind that we need to assure that whoever we pick will be able to deliver the design. So we just need to make sure that we get somebody with experience. That's on the design side. And obviously, if it's a designer that has, not a designer, like a company that has people that has experience working with developers and coordinating with delivery, working together, or designers that have experience with code or something like that. All these things add value. It's modern approaches, and whoever has experience with that will be helpful.
But if you want to check the code, how you expect this to be shared publicly on GitHub or in some kind of presentation form?
We
Anything
don't
else?
expect to see the code of any real site beyond the site itself. Well, on the technical side, maybe
There might
Lauri,
be
you can answer.
some proposals that we got so we did a previous round of proposals for the demo design system for Experience Builder, and actually both proposals came with they had a previous design system that they wanted to use to adopt for this purpose. And in that case, if you are proposing a pre-existing design system, it can be either public or private that we could that you can share access to the team that is reviewing that. And the assumption is that the team is like, if it is a private repository, that the review team is not going to publish it by themselves. So you can share a private code repository with us, and we can consider it as part of the proposal. It's not required. I think what is more important from my perspective is a high-level outline of how you're planning to approach it, whether that includes an existing design system or not. So basically, how would you build this? And obviously, if it doesn't use an existing design system, then it maybe requires a little bit more detail on what is your plan. Because if the proposal is I'm going to build a design system, then it is a little bit challenging to evaluate on what kind of design system would we be getting out of it. So then, in the case of a completely new design system, we would expect to get a little bit more of an idea on what would be there. Roughly how many components would you expect to have there? How many sections would you expect to have there? maybe an idea of like an initial version of like what are your thoughts on what is the set of components that might be in there. It doesn't have to be a final list, but sort of just to have an idea on expectations, that we don't have an expectation where someone expects the design system can come with 3 components and 1 section, and that's the design system. We obviously want to make sure that there's alignment on sort of the scale of the design system. Then if it is an existing design system, it would be great to get access to Figma and any sort of code or storybook that we can see and evaluate what is in there, so that we can see in there. And in that case, the outline can be more focused around what are you anticipating that you have to change about that design system for the purposes of this project? What would that process look like? And then a clear indication of like what is the scope of work that you are intending to take on, whether that is just doing the design or doing both the design and development. Basically what you expect, and then if you have expectations on us, that would be great to indicate there as well, so that we make sure that we can provide what is needed in there.
Related to this, there is a question, and I'm jumping into the chat because I know there are several questions, but this one is completely related to that. By Wolfgang, how large will the scope be? How many sections, components are expected? And I think this is I don't think it is safe to say that there's going to be 12 or 24 components, but it's safe to say there won't be 80 components. It's more like a matter of like a middle ground. Not sure, Lauri, if you know how many components by memory you have right now on the demo design system, but I wouldn't expect this to be a huge undertake
it's probably
in terms of amount of components.
Yeah, many of the fully built out design systems that I've seen built for Drupal, they are more in the realm of 80 to 90 components. I think in this case we can expect it to be less than that, because of like the idea is that this is maybe your 80% of the site, and then there's 20% on top of that, and that can get a sense of like, okay, so maybe we need somewhere in the realm of 40, 50, and then there's some components that get built on top of that. And that obviously, that take it with a grain of salt. We can it depends on the structure of the design system as well, how many of those components we would actually end up having in there.
Yeah, in here it's very important to take into account that the designers that design these have experience building design systems, because in terms of, for example, teasers, if all the content types have the same kind of teaser, if the cards are similar on all the places, like we shouldn't design different components for things that are similar. And this being strategic in terms of which components are designed, it's super important in terms of defining and making sure that scope doesn't escalate.
One question, sorry. If I would build some smaller demo, do you expect demo components to be built with the twig, or I can use some other way to just show the structure?
Demo components, I don't necessarily have a strong opinion whether it's twig or we can assess it with I guess within reasonable constraints. Like if someone sends me design system written in BASIC, I there might be limits into what extent we can go to assess those. But if it is based on React or Svelte or Vue, those are sort of technologies that we can, on a high level, assess what is going on and then figure out how it's constructed.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so maybe we should dive into the specific questions that we have in the chat. There's question on what would be the duration for design research to consider. I guess that's a more specific. Maybe Cristina, you can talk about expectations around what are we expecting to do in terms of design research?
So we don't expect to be a month and a half doing research, and then after that starting the designs. I would expect obviously doing some initial research, because obviously being informed of what the competitors are doing is really important, and be everybody on the same page is really important. But I would assume that research would happen at the same time as the designs start, meaning it would make sense at the beginning on the briefs. We do some meetings, we do some definition of what are the things that needs to happen, and there is some research, but we shouldn't postpone the initial design work until February or something like that, because things escalate easily and time pass, and I would be a little bit concerned if that moved too far. Something that we've been doing on the Drupal CMS, and that in my experience happened in a lot of projects, is that the research is an ongoing process. So it happens at several stages of the design process. So I would expect it to happen like during the design phase, but probably would be best to say it will depend on the designers working on this, how much research they need actually. But I wouldn't expect it to be a month doing research.
Do you have any
All right.
previous data available? Any previous
Sorry?
research data available that we could be able to use?
We do have some benchmarking. We do have some definition of things that we have in mind that would be useful. In my experience, any designer will want to do some personal research on their own site. Whatever we provide, it's going to be more a direction on what things or which competitors you should look at, which are the things that we are thinking that would be like on the right direction, but any designer will still want to chime in and do their own research. So yes, we will provide some insights and some information, but we won't expect that the rest of the designers don't do anything else.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Research has to be baked in.
Yeah.
So one of the questions was, will the development of the drag and drop interface to create and customize the component be part of the development scope? So designing the drag and drop interface itself is not part of the scope. However, we expect to work in close collaboration in terms of making sure that the components work in the drag and drop interface, because there could be specific requirements in terms of, there might be constraints on what kinds of properties, for example, the components can expose in order for them to work with the drag and drop builder. So it's going to be a collaborative effort, but we're not expecting the design system team to be building the drag and drop interface itself. However, there is a second piece of that, which is collaborating with the team that is building experience builders. That's the drag and drop interface. There's part where the design system team needs to design what is the experience of someone using those components in the drag and drop interface. So what kinds of customization options are available for a user who is using these components in the drag and drop interface? And that is part of the design system scope for the team to define in collaboration with us.
Great, thank you. Makes sense.
Then there is a question on why are we looking at brand new design system instead of using Olivero? Or would this be expected as an expansion of Olivero? Cristina, do you want to take this or do you want me to take this?
I can start and you can continue. Basically, so Olivero was, I personally think it's a great design, but it doesn't have designs for all the things that we're looking for, and it's just normal to do rebranding or a redesign from time to time, and it's been a few years since Olivero came out. So that then added into the fact that we want something that can provide a starting point that is not that opinionated and can be more customized on a brand perspective, should actually provide a better starting point for that. On a technical perspective, if somebody wants to start from Olivero and cloning Olivero and working from there, the starting point, whoever starts and does the job will choose where to start from. But we don't expect to use the designs from Olivero itself. There's nothing wrong with Olivero. It's just that it's a new launch. We want a new look and feel for the new product, and that's basic marketing.
All right, that makes sense. Another design system related question: do we want to have Storybook the single directory components and vice versa? There was someone who was concerned about using Figma as the single source of truth for the design system. Yes, that's for you, Cristina, as well.
I actually don't have a strong opinion here. I do think we should ideally have a documentation that should be easily accessible, and Figma wouldn't be friendly enough for developers. And we can, in terms of documentation itself, of where or how to use each of the components, Storybook is a better solution in terms of providing that information either to developers or whoever wants to do that. It's a better platform in terms of sharing documentation. Figma is helpful for annotations and things like that, but it couldn't provide as much information. So I don't think it's a strong requirement. I would assume if we are going to provide documentation somehow, this is the best way where both design and development documentation can marry and be together at the same place.
If I may add that if I decide, I would definitely decide to Storybook be required, because that way you have also place where you can test these components, because sometimes designs in a design tool can be different than rendered design in a browser, and Storybook avoids this. Whoever wants to see the component, how it works in a browser, can test it directly. And also, if you have a combination of multiple components, can see also if it happens that in the UI someone detects a bug, you can make an example in Storybook combination of these components, fix bug, and make sure that there is no bug anymore. And if shows again, you will see directly in a Storybook.
Yeah, and there are also a lot of integrations with Figma and Storybook that will allow you export any changes on the design tokens or anything like that. So it's a really good solution, Storybook.
Okay, I'm gonna go a couple questions from the chat quickly. Do we need to deliver a new theme implemented as a design system, or do we want to extend Olivero to work as a design system? So we are expecting this to be a new theme that is not extending Olivero, but in terms of how you built that theme, whether you use Olivero or not is up to you to decide. Olivero itself is not necessarily built as a component-based design system, so there might be challenges in using it, but I'm open for anyone else to weigh that on their own. If you're building a theme from scratch, then we would need to take care of Drupal specific components as well, like maybe theming for layout builder. With Experience Builder, the focus is that there's less and less admin interfaces that need to be designed in Drupal. So we're even looking into moving things like the local tasks outside of the actual rendered page, which means that there should be less and less need to design any admin-facing interfaces in this new design system. There might be some that we need for legacy support, but to a large extent, we're not expecting anything like restyling of Layout Builder. So there might be some minimal styling that we need to do so that Layout Builder can work in there, but we're not expecting like a massively refreshed experience from what exists today in there.
If I understood, you expect someone who does development on design system to also implement design system into a Drupal team, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Then there's another one. We have one of our generic design systems, which is quite flexible with WCAG 2.1 compliant and can be used for any marketing sites. We're ready to open source it. Can we use it as a base to start and build on top of it with further user research, or would we like to build the design system from scratch? I actually encourage using things that exist already so that we are not reinventing the wheel. So if there are design systems that exist that you believe would be a good fit for this, that is encouraged and is something that would be considered as a good approach in general. Are we allowed to use dev dependency in terms of NPM packages to use modern techniques for front-end development? For example, we are using React for Experience Builder development, Svelte for Project Browser, and even demo design system using NPM. So the expectation here is that it should be possible to work with just Twig. We might create a version of this that is separate from Twig, that is actually running with React, because that is something that Experience Builder might support out of the box. But that is not converting the Twig into React is not part of the scope that you're proposing. That is something that we would do outside of this scope. Whether you can. Oh,
Yeah, Lauri, I can just clarify a bit on that question. Like, I was kind of giving an example, like you mentioned, we don't want to use post CSS, right? SAS or
Yep.
other compilers kind of stuff, right? But I was just more like mentioning them as a dev dependency. So for example, in demo design system, we were using NPM to basically compile everything and give then output the components finally, right? Like instead of, if our components are itself configurable, right? And they can be configured in the UI, and they can also, like, let's say, allow for using the colors, like using root variables, for example.
Yeah.
Like we generate a CSS file on the fly to basically override the root variables file, right? Then if our design system itself is highly configurable, then can we use the modern development tools like maybe Tailwind or NPM to basically build the dev dependencies to like bring those tools in the process to basically so that final output theme is basically highly configurable and customizable.
So Tailwind specifically is something that we're looking into adding support for Experience Builder. Outside of Tailwind, it would depend on what is the impact for the person who is configuring this in the Experience Builder. So in order for it to work, we would have to be able to integrate the Experience Builder UI with whatever process is happening in the theme, so that, for example, the colors could be configured using Experience Builder. And if it's using built like CSS variables or Tailwind, that's already something that we've solved. If it is something else that you're doing, like let's say you are planning to use Bootstrap, that is not something we've looked into at this point, and then therefore it might be a risk. So I would anticipate I would expect that if it is using something other than Tailwind, or CSS variables, for example, for replacing the variables, then you would have to specify what is your plan for being able to modify those aspects with Experience Builder. So
Okay. Got it. Got it.
Does it help clarify that?
Yep, definitely. So as long as theme is highly configurable from the UI itself without running any runtime dependency, it should be good.
Yes. And we've done proof of concepts on being able to compile Tailwind within browser itself, and that's why we know that, okay, that is something that we can do with Experience Builder. But we haven't done the same exercise on many other build tools. And then that's why we're discouraging that there's like a broad set of different build tools that as part of the proposal, because then we would have to evaluate every solution separately. And can we actually make that work with Experience Builder?
Yeah. Can you share that Tailwind one? Just curious to know how it worked out. Maybe I guess it's with WSM, WebAssembly.
Yes, and we have Balance in the call who's been working on that. If you want to just give, I don't know, maybe you want to give like a 30-second summary of how that works.
Yeah, so this is really a proof of concept. But what we did was we built the solution with the idea that we want to support Tailwind CSS version 4, which is still in alpha. They're tagging a beta soon, and they're trying to tag a stable release by the end of the year. The new configuration format of that is going to be purely CSS variables. So that was the most exciting thing about that. And to be able to compile that in the browser, we took a function from Tailwind 3, which is doing the discovery of the classes. So that we use that for reading the markup that we need to work with to extract the CSS class names. And then we switch over to Tailwind 4 functions to really do the compilation. And yeah, for that we are actually, for that we didn't even have to use WebAssembly, because that was we were able to run it in the browser. And there's the final step of using Lightning CSS, which turns the Tailwind generated markup into more compatible, less modern CSS markup that all the browsers can understand. And for that we needed WebAssembly, and that is all packaged up. And we actually published it on NPM. I will paste in the link right now.
All right, thanks, Balin. That's really helpful. The reason I wanted to just explain a little bit on that is to explain why it is hard for, like, it's a lot of work goes into adding a support to a specific build tool, and that's why we want to avoid having to consider several different build tools.
Question: have you considered to use web components in combination with Twig or only Twig?
I don't necessarily have a strong opinion to either direction on web components. It would depend on the specific application of that. So I would say that it, like, if there's a proposal that uses web components, it's something that can be considered. I'm not necessarily considering this a pro or con.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so there's some more.
There are a few design related questions. One of them is, for example, from a Figma standpoint, should we avoid using paid plugins? And I would say you can use plugins that other people can use, if, especially if we can collaborate. But we don't expect to use paid plugins for this, especially if we have to support this over time and evolve the design system over time. So if we can avoid this, that would be a good direction. And then there is another one that is which branding guidelines should be followed for the new design system. And that's a little bit of something that will be more defined when we get there, especially at the end of December, beginning of January. But we don't expect this to be Drupal branded, to use the Drupal brand. We do expect to have more agnostic style that can be adapted easily and can be let's say you put a logo, you change a color, and it's closer to a brand, and then you change a few things and it's closer to another brand, something that it's more adaptable to different situations. Ali, you had something else?
Yeah, there's more questions that I'm gonna go through. Is there a word limit for the proposal? I don't have a strict word limit in mind, but I would say that if you are going well above 5,000 words in your proposal, then it's gonna be quite a lot for us to process. So I would that's not an expectation to give a 5,000 word proposal. I'm just saying that that's like, if you are going way above that, then probably you should consider that maybe in this case less might be sufficient. Can we link out PDFs, docs? Oh,
Yeah, I was just going to say, keep in mind that we are going to have just a little bit more than a week to evaluate everything, or maybe 2 weeks, because we want to make sure that if we're asking people to rush later or to not have enough time, we want to give an answer soon, but we won't have enough availability to go through super long proposals beyond, of course, reviewing examples.
Can we link out PDFs, docs, slide decks, and or videos? PDFs, docs, and slide decks are okay. I would say videos is kind of getting to where, like, if you have videos that are half an hour long, for example, and then we have a team that needs to go through videos and long documents, then it might be quite a lot to ask from the review board to look. So I would say PDFs, docs, and slide decks are helpful, or can be helpful if it helps explain the approach, for example. Probably more helpful if they are embedded in the document itself, in the context of what you're proposing, but I leave that up to folks doing the proposals. Besides SAS and Post CSS, what are the other tech shouldn't be used? I would probably encourage reaching out with specific questions, or if something is okay, and we can then publish those answers on the proposal as an addition, so everyone can see what our thoughts on those are. Because of the goal is to integrate this with Experience Builder. It's very hard to tell what kinds of tools people are expecting to integrate with here. We're also expecting this to be something where people can contribute to this in the long run. So even if this is built by a close-knit team, at first people should be able to propose bug fixes and so on in future to this. So if we require a very convoluted development tooling for this, like let's say you need Java in order to compile this theme, then that might be a challenge. So I'd encourage people to then, if you have concerns on specific tools where you want to get answers, that is this something that will disqualify me, feel free to reach out, and we can give an answer beforehand. Will the leadership team be weighing on the name of the design system, or is this up to the implementation team? So I'd expect us to collaborate on that together. So that's going to be collaboration between the Drupal CMS leadership team as well as the team implementing the designs. I think there's one more question. Will it be designed to work exclusively with the full content display of a page, or will it also support other view modes such as teaser and card? How might this impact its implementation? So there are use cases that are outside of the full content display that we need to think about. For example, there's an event content type in the Drupal CMS. So we would probably have to be able to list events somewhere in order for the events to be useful. So there are going to be some scenarios where we are looking into expanding that full content display into additional display modes. In order to get a sense of what the scope of what we would be supporting, actually looking at the content model of Drupal CMS would be a good starting point. Maybe, Cristina, we should add that as a note to this page, because I think it's actually quite important context with this.
Yeah, there's another one I was actually going to answer, but there is some time still. Do we expect once finished? Do we expect the maintenance and data support as well? Or we are going to take control of this? We do expect that whoever builds these states, and at least as a maintainer or helping out for a while, so we don't expect people to disappear, to deliver it and just disappear on that. So I think that's specified on the brief, that we expect some ongoing support after this. Obviously, we don't expect the same capacity that we would expect from during the development process once made. It's more about staying as a maintainer rather than making big updates.
Who decides of how to say number of contributors who can be involved? Let's say if some company gets this over to work on development part, and then they have like 3 developers, and some other 3 developers from community think this is really interesting and they want to join, who decides if they can join or not?
I personally think it's up to the team that is proposing to define what kind of structure they expect to have for their team. So, for example, if it's a company, it's probably pretty, so like it is straightforward on what kind of governance they might have. It's probably something that they would do internally. But then if it is a team of contributors that are proposing, then there might have to be some governance around it.
Yeah, I think it's important to have the expectation, to be clear that we have the expectation to involve contributors at the end of the process at least. So it's not finished, done, and then day one after releasing, then the code starts being available. We expect people to be able to start using, testing, and contributing a little bit earlier than that. So the sooner it is and the more open the development is, the easier it makes things. It will make this transition.
Yeah, I would expect the process to be similar to what we did with the Starship demo design system. So anyone who has been involved in that, where we had a team from Salsa Digital who did an initial implementation of the design system internally. They just kind of hacked together something very quickly with their team, and then they kind of came to the community and said, okay, here's where we are with this. They divided it to some things where contributors could help, for example, helping with QA and so on, that then helps onboard new contributors to help with those tasks. They started running meetings in a Slack channel to engage with contributors, and that way, even though the project was largely owned by Salsa Digital, they were able to engage with contributors, especially after the initial build. I'll leave that also up to the individual teams proposing on like at which stage they would like to engage with contributors and what kind of engagement they want to have, because of different teams have different structures. So feel free to in the outline specify roughly at which point would you expect to open something up for contributors. We are at time. If you have any additional questions, and especially with those specific technology questions on this, is this technology allowed in there? Feel free to reach out after the call, and we'll update the based on the questions that come up. We'll update the proposal page. So feel free to I guess look at that page again to see if some of your questions have been already answered. in there. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
How we can
Thank
reach
you, everyone.
that page? Link on that page with the form or some email.
We'll add email address to the proposal to reach out.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.